Just Imagine, a podcast series by Imagine Theatre.
Yes, hello again and welcome to episode 124 of this podcast series. And this time we're going to talk to a star of one of your favourite sitcoms who's also an entertainment and pantomime legend.
For more information, go to their website at www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.
Now, in the last episode, I was joined by Imagine's joint CEOs, Managing Director Steve Bowden and his wife, Business and Marketing Director Sarah Bowden, to review the 25-26 pantomime season. If you're new to the series, and if you love panto, this is definitely the place to be. So far, we've met all sorts of fascinating guests, from celebrities and backstage team members to panto practitioners and academics. We've discussed lots of different aspects of the genre, from specific panto characters and titles to how pantomime is produced, its history and its future. Now, there's an index to all of the episodes we've done so far, and you can catch up with any episode you've missed where you normally get your podcasts. And while you're there, don't forget to subscribe to the series so you don't miss any future episodes. This time, I'm delighted to say I've been joined by the pantomime legend and stage and screen actress who's appeared in everything from the most popular sitcoms and soaps to murder mysteries and movies. She's currently playing Judith Lloyd-James in the Madame Blanc mysteries on Channel 5 and is perhaps best known as Boyce's wife Marlene in Only Fools and Horses. Sue Holderness, how are you?
Pretty good, thank you. And at last we managed to talk to each other, Martin. I'm an IT idiot, so it always takes a little time to get these things sorted out.
Yeah, well, just to fill you in, Sue's had a few problems with her broadband at home, and so we've had a couple of stalled attempts to do this, but thankfully we're here now, and it's really nice to be able to talk to you finally. Let's start at the very beginning. I think you were born and sort of grew up in Hampstead, didn't you? But where's the theatrical influence in your life come from?
Well, I was born in Hampstead, but we'd only stayed there for about a year, and I moved out to suburbia because my dad was an airline pilot, and so we moved to Ruislip, which was close enough to Heathrow. So I grew up here, and I have a sister who's 5.5 years older than me, and she went to the local dance school. And so from the age of 0, my mother would take me along and I'd sit on her knee and watch the dancing. And it was there, I suppose, that I got the bug, because when I was 3, they allowed me to go on stage, although I was too young actually to be part of the class, but because I was quite good as a tap dancer at the age of 3. So they gave me a little number, and I absolutely loved it. All the big girls danced around singing, "Oh, you beautiful doll, you great big beautiful doll," and I was dressed as a little dolly. And I came out of my little dolly's box and did a tap dance, and I heard the laughter and the applause, and I was then hooked.
And obviously it was something that you pursued from that age onwards. Central School of Speech and Drama, I think you trained at. But as a child, do you remember going to see pantomime?
I do, very clearly. It was a very important part of my life, and I still remember the excitement and the thrill of knowing we were going to the pantomime. You know, the build-up to Christmas is very exciting anyway, and pantomime certainly gets the whole family in the mood, because that's the great thing about pantomime. Every age group can go. You can go together as a family. But I also quite like the idea of going to pantomime after Christmas, because after Christmas it can all be a bit of a letdown, can't it? And so our preferred thing was to have pantomime to look forward to after Christmas Day had actually got behind us, and we'd had too much to eat and drink and watched Morecambe and Wise on the telly or Only Fools and Horses. And then we knew that the family had an exciting treat ahead of us. So I recommend that to people. If you haven't booked already, try thinking about after Christmas, because it's a nice thing to look forward to.
Do you remember which pantomime you may have seen, or which may have been the first pantomime you ever saw as a child, and who might have been in it?
I can't remember that because I was so tiny, but I'm pretty sure it was Cinderella, and I still think that Cinderella is probably the most magical of them all, because the whole transformation, the coach and the Cinderella suddenly going from rags to this beautiful ball gown, it stayed with me very clear. In fact, I saw Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs on ice when I was about 7, and that was pretty thrilling too. No, the thing that is so exciting for little things is the colour and the costumes and the magic, and there are always wonderful slapstick comedy routines, aren't there? Which of course appeal to everybody, but particularly to little ones. We love people getting cakes in the face and being, sloshed generally with a large amount of silly soapy water in the face. And I think that goes on to this day. Kids and grown-ups do like the slapstick scenes.
They absolutely do. When you'd finished your training, I think your acting career began in Manchester in a sort of rep company doing all sorts of things, didn't it?
Yes, I started off as Moth in A Midsummer Night's Dream, and it was a rather glitzy production where all the fairies were supposed to be very much part of the show, and they sort of ferried about, flapping in the background all the time. And we had wonderful costumes with great big wings, and the choreographer and director called Litz Pisk, when she saw these costumes, she said, "I don't like the costumes they are." She came from Austria. I want to see the bodies. And so the costumes were scrapped, and we were all told we had to paint our bodies. I was painted grey as Moth, and we had 3 tiny little bits of fur in suitable places just for our decency. So it was a bit of a baptism of fire. My very first job, I was virtually naked, bald cap, painted grey, and this sort of figure floating about the stage, dressed in absolutely nothing except 3 little bits of fluff. But then my second job, I got to play the lead opposite Jack Good in his rock version of Catch My Soul, Desdemona. It was thrilling.
Many people remember Jack Good, of course.
6-5 Special.
6-5 Special and
You've
so
got
many
to be
others.
You've got to be a certain age to remember.
So I'm guessing you didn't perform in pantomime as a child, but how influential was the genre on your early career?
It certainly influenced me early on, but I never, my parents didn't want me to perform. I could have gone in as one of those teeny tots, but they didn't want me to be quite as committed to that. My dancing was very much twice a week, because I was also mad about horses. I didn't perform professionally in anything until after I'd left drama school when I was 20. And I think that's probably right. It's a big commitment. And, it's a big thing that the parents take on. You've got to be there all the time.
Early 70s, your career really took off. I think 74 particularly, the movie That'll Be the Day, which was David Essex, of course, Ringo Starr I think was in it as well, and Bless This House with Sid James.
Yes, I remember my note on the first day of filming with David Essex was that the director came up and said, "Well, Sue, you've just got to look as though you fancy David." It was not a challenging role. And then I did get to do one episode only of Bless This House and met Sid James, and was really quite tongue-tied about it because I was such a fan, but he was sweet. Most of the big stars that I've worked with, when you go in and you find you can't speak because they're so famous and you're so in awe, have always been terribly sweet to me. I think Joanna Lumley and Patrick Whitney, when I did The New Avengers, I was rigid with fear, and quite quickly they were very sweet, and they became good friends, and it was a gloriously happy job. It's called Medium Rare if it ever comes up. New Avengers. It's a jolly good storyline.
I have to say as well, it's fairly easy for actors to be pigeonholed sometimes, isn't it? And to get stuck in a certain genre or a typecast character. You've done such a massive variety of things, and sitcoms like Bless This House. We'll talk about Only Fools and Horses, of course, later on. I mentioned that you'd done, a number of soaps, from Doctors to EastEnders, and so many different things. I mean, it's been a joy, really, having that variety, isn't it?
Yes, I've been very lucky, and funnily enough, I did a one-woman play called Our Kid, which was written by Brian Clemens, who wrote The Avengers and The Professionals and all those things. And it's another writer, Dennis Spooner, came to see me in this one-woman play, which was all about Myra Hindley. It was a very scary piece, and I lost 2 stone doing it. It was a very powerful and I think clever play, and it led to an awful lot of my television work. It's Ray Butt, who cast me in Only Fools, had seen it. A lot of my television work had been seen, and I did a series called End of Part 1 for London Week at Television, where we all did lots of impersonations. And most of the time on television, I was cast rather posh. I was playing sort of Joanna Barrington Smythe in things like Tightrope. So when Only Fools came along, I honestly don't think that they knew where I came from. I don't think they knew what my normal voice was. I think they just assumed that I was a Cockney. And they didn't, and of course Marlene was not supposed to be in Only Fools for very long. I don't know if you know this story, but John Sullivan, who wrote Only Fools and Horses, was a great fan of the show Minder.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Minder that really inspired Sullivan to think that there could be a show set in the East End, because, of course, George Cole and Dennis Waterman were quite, rough, cockney types, and it was a very successful, funny show. The thing that that Sullivan liked very much, was George Cole having this wife who was indoors, who you never saw. So you had this wonderful picture of this monster at home. And so they talked about Marlene quite a lot in the early days of Only Fools. People would say, well, do you remember Marlene? And the reply was always, all the boys remember Marlene. So you had this wonderful picture of this terrible old slapper at home that he intended you never to see. So it was only when he decided that he'd got this wonderful storyline. He wanted Del Boy and Rodney to look after a dog. He couldn't think where the dog would come from, so he thought, well, Boyce could give Marlene a dog and then go away on holiday, so we don't have to see her for very long. And that'll be the solution to getting a dog into the show. Well, he wrote such a wonderful little scene for the handover, when Marlene hands over the dog to the boys, that he rang me a couple of weeks later at home and said, we weren't going to see Marlene, but we like her, we want her back. And so Marlene became a regular feature of the show from then on, about which I'm extremely grateful.
Well, just going back a little bit, you mentioned Minder. You did Minder, I think the year before Only Fools and Horses. And, of course, the fabulous writer John Sullivan you'd already worked with, because I think you were in Dear John, weren't you?
Well, Dear John happened actually after I'd started playing Marlene, and I was in and out of Only Fools, really more out than in. I didn't do that many episodes. So while I was doing Only Fools, Dear John came up. And yes, John Sullivan cast me as... Terence Edmond played the wife of Ralph Bates, who played the lead, John. Mm-hmm. And Terence Edmond had a wife with 5 children in the show. They always say never work with children or animals, and John Sullivan was always writing episodes for me where I had either a dog or a child or more. And I had these 5 children in the Dear John episode. I absolutely loved doing Dear John, and it was so sad that we lost Ralph Bates, because I think that John Sullivan would have gone right on writing that.
I likened it in a way to sitcoms like Please Sir, because it brought so many different, interesting characters together in a sort of ensemble piece, really, didn't it?
Yes, I mean, he was extraordinary, John, wasn't he? He had so many wonderful ideas and different series out. Did you ever see Citizen Smith?
Yes, of course.
Well, Citizen Smith with Robert Lindsay was brilliant and terribly popular. But after 3 series of Citizen Smith, Robert Lindsay decided that for his career's sake, he should stop doing it. He shouldn't be doing the same, go on doing the same thing. And it was a great blow to John Sullivan when Robert Lindsay decided to come out of Citizen Smith, because, John had a mortgage and children at the time, and he needed an income. So it was then that he had to decide to come up with a new show, and he came up with Only Fools and Horses. So thank you, Robert Lindsay, for leaving Citizen Smith.
Obviously, Only Fools and Horses changed the lives and careers of so many people, and in those early days, I don't think anybody really had any idea just how massive it was going to be, did they?
No, absolutely not. And when the first series went out, it wasn't actually terribly successful. The viewing figures were low, and I think the BBC probably would have commissioned Series 2, but before that could happen, there was a strike at the BBC, and so there wasn't actually very much material to put out. So they put Series 1 out a second time, by which time word had spread, and the viewing figures shot up. And they asked John Sullivan to write Series 2. In the old days, the BBC used to nurse shows that weren't doing terribly well. They don't do that anymore. So from Series 2, of course, the viewing figures are fantastic. And by the time we got to, in 1996, when we thought it was all the end, we were getting 26 million viewers, which was sort of unheard of. And then there was this gap, 5 years, when we thought it was all over, because, of course, Del and Rodney had found this wonderful watch, and they made their millions. But the public were crying out for Only Fools and Horses on Christmas Day. It had become a tradition, hadn't it?
Yeah.
So somehow they managed to get us all together in 2001, and we made 3 long episodes to go out over the next 3 consecutive Christmases. But at the end of that, I think we probably all knew that it was all over. But we did. It was lovely coming back together again. It was like a sort of family every time we got back. The same crew would request to be on it every time because they loved it so much.
And of course, the storylines, John Sullivan's writing was absolutely perfect in every way, wasn't it?
Well, brilliant. They're brilliant scripts, and we go back to them sometimes. And one watches these excellent series on television that are terribly depressing because they're so violent, but gripping. You can't turn them off. But for the last half hour or even 50 minutes before you go to bed, it's worth going into Gold and watching an Only Fools and Horses episode because it cheers you up before you try to go to sleep. And I've come across episodes that I really know not at all because as I wasn't in series 1, 2, and 3. I never met Leonard Pearce, and going back to those old episodes, it's just joyful. They're so clever. The plotting in every episode's got a fantastic plot, as well as these brilliant comedy scenes. The sad thing is that John used to write much longer than 30 minutes, so a lot of very funny scenes had to be cut because you could only hang on to the plot, which is why later on they became 50-minute episodes, which was better for his style, really, because he could fill 50 minutes with, these wonderful stories, and all the jokes could stay in.
And Green Green Grass of Home, of course, came from that as a sort of spin-off, and your on-screen chemistry with John Challis was incredible.
That was very, very nice for us. When the series was all over in 2001, then John and I were asked to tour in the theatre. We did 4 plays together, and during all that, where we loved working together on stage and on screen. And it was during that time that John Challis's wife threw a big party for him in their house in the countryside. They'd moved to this amazing property on the Shropshire-Herefordshire border, and they'd done a lot of work into it. So Carol, John's wife, as a surprise for John for his 60th birthday, invited all the Only Fools cast and crew and all their London friends and local friends to this fantastic party. And it was during the party that John Sullivan was sitting, sipping a glass of wine and looking at the proceedings and watching John Challis welcoming all his posh guests to his wonderful home, that he suddenly thought, what if Boyce and Marlene bought a great big mansion in the country and they tried to be Lord and Lady of the Manor? And so it was totally thanks to that party that we got the idea. And when we were in Brighton touring one of the plays, he invited us round to his little flat there, because he's got a holiday home there. And we heard John Sullivan say, I just got this idea at the party. What do you think of the idea of a spin-off series starring Boyce and Marlene? And we said we thought it was a jolly good idea. And so work began quite quickly on what turned out to be a very happy series, because again, all the crew that work on Only Fools requested to work on the Green Green Grass. So again, we had this wonderful happy team. And of course a happy team away from home, because we had to film it all down there. We used John Challis's own house as our home. The crew all stayed in Ludlow. So it was a very happy shoot.
Now, after all these years, since the final episode of Only Fools and Horses, the following is incredible. And I can only think of 2 sitcoms that have the same sort of following, where, fans and groups of people meet up and panels, Q&As and so on. Dad's Army was the other one that came to mind. And even today, the surviving cast members from Only Fools and Horses get invited to conventions and all sorts of things, don't you?
Yes, we do 2 a year now. We used to do 1 a year, but now we do 2 a year because David Jason never used to do them. And having come to one, I suppose about 3 years ago, he was really genuinely touched by the amount of love there is for the show and how much of a difference it's made to a lot of people's lives, because people do come along and say, I was at my wit's end, I didn't know where I was going to turn, and watching your show meant that I thought I could carry on. It really has been an important part of a lot of people's lives. And, they say laughter's the best medicine. I think John Sullivan has probably saved the NHS a fortune.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Let's get back to Panto then. You've done a number of pantos, I think. Do you remember the first one you did as a performer?
I do. It was Swindon. I played Dandini in Cinderella. I lived about 20 minutes from my digs, and I'd done a series called Tightrope, where I was supposed to be a girl guide with karate skills, and I'd been taught self-defence. And on my way home from my Swindon pantomime one night, a chap did leap out he sort of stumbled out from behind a hedge and put his arms round me, and I was convinced that I was being attacked. And I used one of these self-defence moves, which is you picture this chap's arms around my neck. With the heel of my hand, I brought it up hard under his chin. And the man dropped to the ground like a stone. So I was absolutely terrified that I might have killed him, of course. And shall I check? And I thought then he might attack me again, so I rushed back to my digs. And in the morning, as the sun rose, I tiptoed round to see if the corpse was still there. And it wasn't, so I don't think I had killed him. And I did get a friend of mine who was the trumpeter in the band to ring around all the hospitals, and apparently nobody had died. But it is a terribly clever move. And, if somebody did lose a rather nasty uncle at that stage in Swindon, I've got away with it till now, don't tell a soul.
From the moment you first stepped out onto the stage in pantomime, though, have you always loved it?
I've always loved it, and very rarely have been anything except wicked. Of course, when I was in the days when I was playing Dandini, it was all just fun and tap dancing and a laugh. And I did play Good Fairy once in Richmond with Aled Jones and John Challis, and I found it really terribly dull being good. I very much like coming out and frightening people.
What's the attraction then in the baddie role?
Well, the devil's got the best tunes, Martin. We all know that. It's fun. It's good fun casting spells on people. I cast spells on the audience. I cast spells on the company members. And my spells only seem to work on stage. They don't seem to manage to turn people into frogs in the audience. But I can be really quite ruthless on stage. And it's enormous fun. We love a bit of audience participation. That's part of the joy. And my favourite shows, I think, are the early morning shows, because there's a series of about, we do about a week's worth of early 10 o'clock shows. And that's when you get the teeny-weeny ones, who come in from schools. And there's nothing better than the sound of very small children, hysterical with joy, who really can't help themselves. They're so, properly corpsing. That's a very nice sound. And those, of course, are the audience that we hope we will have when they grow up and bring their own children to the show. That first moment when you see the lights and hear the music, and you have this wonderful experience of having a story you get involved with, and jokes and laughs, and you get frightened. I think it's important to be frightened, and you get a happy ending. It's always a happy ending, as hard as I try for it not to be. And so I think that it's a very important thing, panto, for whole families.
Yeah, and I mentioned the variety of stuff that you've done, but polar opposite to panto, I think, maybe film and certainly radio, with no audience, no feedback, and, everything in a film is actually broken up, maybe filmed out of sequence and so on. It's completely different, isn't it, as a discipline? It
is, and at the moment I'm about to start series 5 of the Madame Blanc Mysteries, which is a Channel 5 show, but also currently on Netflix. So do catch up with it. All 4 series available on Netflix. It's a very, very lovely show to do, because, of course, we're filming in the sunshine and we stay in lovely hotels and we're all very good friends. And, again, we have a crew who keep asking to come back and work with us. But it is true that it's difficult to know where your laughs are going to be. I love working with a studio audience. A lot of people don't. You've got cameras and a studio audience, so some people find it rather difficult to gauge that, because you've sort of got to hit the back as well as playing to the cameras. But, of course, you've got microphones. And so that is a feature of filming, that you've just got to trust the writing, play it for truth, and hope that the laughs are just there.
And that was one of the joys of Only Fools and Horses, wasn't it? That you did have a live audience, and a mutual friend of ours, Jeff Stevenson, he appeared in a couple of episodes, but he was the warm-up man, and having an audience there really helped.
Yes, he was the warm-up man for many seasons, and it's not an easy job being a warm-up man, because you've got to keep tickling the audience along and keeping them happy, and giving gentle jokes all the way through, but you don't want the warm-up man to be funnier than the show. So it's a very difficult level to reach as a comic, and he did it so well that John Sullivan did indeed invite him to be in 1 or maybe 2 episodes, because he was so grateful to him for what he did with the audience. The audience just, they came in happy, and they loved everything that he did. They giggled away, but then the main event topped even that. It was a very tricky game. Bobby Bragg was another one who was absolutely excellent as a warm-up man.
And you've worked with so many people over the years in film, television, radio, and on stage. It must be great to bump into them again in panto, because panto brings so many people together from so many areas of the business, doesn't it?
Yes, it's lovely. And funnily enough, this time I'm working with nobody that I'd worked with before. So that's another nice thing. You get to know a whole new group of people. The thing that's so interesting in the business at the moment is how many young people are so multi-gifted. You know, they sing, they dance, they play musical instruments. It's a demanding profession, and people are... When I was at drama school, I was warned, don't tell anybody that you sing or dance because you'll never be taken seriously as an actor. Well, now they really do want everybody to be able to do everything. You go to some of these musicals in town and they're just extraordinary what kids are able to do.
What is it you love about panto then, as an audience member or as a performer?
Just that it gets you in the spirit for Christmas, doesn't it? I didn't do pantomime last year because I was doing other things, and I honestly really missed it. I think that the whole... I personally like going in, setting up my dressing room. I do it all in red and gold and silver, so that the dressing room itself feels sort of festive. And it's just very nice to hear the buzz of the audience as they come in, and they're all getting ready for this big day. And as I say, after Christmas, when there's a certain sort of slight feeling of it's all over, then you get that lovely excitement again of people coming in, and coming with not only mum and dad, but grandparents and teeny-weeny ones, big ones, old ones. That was one of the joys of Only Fools and Horses, that John Sullivan, when he wrote it, had grandparents living in his house and small children, and he wanted everybody to be able to watch his shows. So it is proper family-friendly, just like panto.
And you know, I think the thing is, these days, at a time when families very rarely do anything together anymore, they certainly don't watch TV together, and they probably don't even sit down and eat meals together. You know, the one thing they still do is go to panto.
Exactly. And I think that's so sad, isn't it? No, I've got grandchildren, great-grandchildren, I've got step-grandchildren, nieces, nephews. They never watch the television. They all watch whatever they're watching on their tablets or iPhones or whatever they use. And so you don't get anymore that thing of everybody all sitting down, 26 million people watching the same show. But they do catch up. You know, the word gets round, and they do catch up with the shows on telly that they... I've got a lot of fans, Only Fools fans, who are sort of 7, 8, 9, who've been forced to watch it by their parents, of course. And it still works. They still enjoy it.
Well, there's certainly a lot of panto in Only Fools and Horses, you know, in the slapstick elements and so on. I remember Roy Hudd saying panto for him, his gauge was always, you know, is it the sort of thing Laurel and Hardy would do in terms of slapstick comedy and so on. And as a rule of thumb, that's what panto is, isn't it?
Well, Roy Hudd, of course, was a genius, wasn't he? And I saw him in panto a number of times. He had so many incredibly funny routines. And in fact, his wife directed me in a pantomime once, and she, of course, had got a lot of information from Roy. No, we miss him greatly. What a clever man Roy Hudd was.
Beauty and the Beast has really risen in popularity compared to some of the other titles, partly because of the Disney remake and the original Disney full-length cartoon and so on. I just wonder which might be your favourite panto title.
Well, it's funny. There used to be 8 pantomimes that would go around in a circuit, so that people running theatres would do them in order. You don't really see Mother Goose very much anymore. Dick Whittington is less popular. Jack and the Beanstalk. It's the ones that have got Disney films that tend to pull people in now, which is a shame because some of those other pantomimes were really very lovely. But for me personally, I think Beauty and the Beast is my favourite. I like the fact that I've got the power to turn this extremely annoying prince into a beast. I find that very satisfying. But I also think it's quite good that he eventually becomes good and is allowed to be a beautiful prince in the end.
I think it has a great adventure as well. So like Jack and the Beanstalk, for instance, Aladdin, Dick Whittington, there's a certain amount of adventure, which you don't really get in Cinderella. Cinderella's a beautiful story, but there's no adventure in that in quite the same way. So I think it's perfect, isn't it?
Belle has got to get herself through this scary forest to get to the castle to try and rescue her best buddy and the dame. And so all the way through you've got wonderful, light, glorious moments, but also some scary stuff.
And at the end of the panto season, what does 2026 hold for you? Is it more Madame Blanc?
Yes, more Madame Blanc, I'm happy to say. Well, I've just got off a ship, a P&O cruise ship, as you know. I hope there'll be more cruises. But at the beginning of March, we head off to Gozo. And I hope this doesn't destroy it for everybody. The series is set in France near Biarritz, but we in fact film it in Gozo and Malta, largely because that's cheaper. But but we do have very beautiful. We've got lovely sets. We've got a lot of Gozo. It passes very well for France, and we spend 11, maybe 12 this time weeks out there filming what will be, I think, 6 episodes. We've got a 2-hour special going out, which we filmed in June this year, which is quite exciting. Usually they're 50-minute episodes, but we've got a 2-hour film going. So do tune into that. Judith Lloyd-James returns. I love Judith Lloyd-James. She's the actual nightmare Brit abroad. And the longer we go on, the worse she becomes. And I hope that I'll still be playing her when I'm 80.
So make sure you check that out, the Madame Blanc Mysteries on Channel 5 and Netflix. Congratulations on another fabulous Panto season at Fareham Live in Beauty and the Beast. And Sue, thank you so much for talking to us.
Well, thank you for being so patient with my inability to make anything work. But we did it in the end, Martin.
We did it in the end. Thank you so much. That's it for now. Don't forget to subscribe through your favourite podcast app. Make sure you join me, Martin Ballard, next time for episode 125, when we start a new 4-part series looking at a year in the life of a producer.
Thank you for listening to the latest edition of Just Imagine, the podcast series from Imagine Theatre. And you can find out more by going to www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.